the people aren't like the clear cut, like, oh, this guy's a fighter, this girl's a fighter. Like, those guys are always the ones I kind of gravitate to because I feel closest to them because that's the way I felt. Like, like no one's looking at me and going like, oh, that guy's a fighter, like, so I always felt like, oh, I want to, those are the ones I feel like I can cultivate that. The people that everybody else might look over, I'm like, those are the ones I'm like, I give them to me.
Athletes like that or students like that's our biggest accomplishment at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
When you could raise them from the ground up. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of A Black Belt Way of Life. I am your host, Master Joseph Lupo Jr. And on today's episode, I am joined by coach, owner of Ringsport Muay Thai, Mr. Erik Ruiz.
Hi, how are you doing?
Pleasure to have you here today. It was awesome. I had one of your pupils, one of your athletes, Invicta FC, former Invicta FC world champion, Miss Jillian DeCourcy.
Yeah.
Said some amazing things about you.
Yeah, Jill's a fun person. She's been working on and off with me for, I don't know, probably over like 15 years already.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And in Muay Thai specifically?
In the beginning, I was teaching at a school. Sometimes I was teaching kickboxing, sometimes I was teaching jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
So she might have worked a little bit with me in jiu-jitsu at the very beginning. Then kickboxing for a little bit. And then I stayed at that gym teaching, but she had switched to our mutual jiu-jitsu instructor opened up the gym. And then I hooked up with her later on when she started doing more like A class or like semi-pro fights.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted to work on her striking. So then I jumped back in and I started training jiu-jitsu a little bit more.
Okay.
As well.
Now with the striking, I see you have something here on this table. Now this represents Muay Thai, correct?
Yeah, it definitely represents the more spiritual aspect, I guess, of Muay Thai. That's one of the things that, for me, I think makes Muay Thai very special is that it's especially in Thailand, it's very mixed into the culture and it's mixed into their form of like Buddhism and so it's very intertwined with their culture. It's not just fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's more than a fight.
Yeah,
I completely understand the spiritual, mental aspect of the fight game.
Yeah, so it's definitely one of the things that kind of attracted me to it. It's not just definitely still carries the martial art kind of feel to it compared to, let's say, like a K1 or Glory or something like that, or even MMA where it just feels like a fight, like boxing. But with Muay Thai, it always has that other aspect of it, similar to, I would say, like karate or like when you see karate done like Okinawa or something.
Sure.
It just has a different feel.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're gonna get more into that in a bit. But check out our sponsor, Mr. Joseph Ferrone of Whitestone Realty. This episode of A Black Belt Way of Life is brought to you by Mr. Joseph Ferrone of Whitestone Realty. For all your real estate needs, both commercial and residential, don't hesitate to reach out to Mr. Joseph Ferrone. All his information is in the show notes. Check out our official apparel company of this podcast, Best Martial Arts Muto USA, for anything related to martial arts, equipment, uniforms. Check it out. All their info is in the show notes. So, Mr. Erik, coming from a night of teaching at your school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, shot right over here from our last sparring class.
Right. I brought up, you're the owner of Ringsport Muay Thai, located in Whitestone, Queens, New York. Mm-hmm. An interesting thing about your location, upstairs, that deli, it's now a deli.
I think I know what you're going to say.
That was my father's school.
Yeah, it was a Munes
Taekwondo. That's my grandmaster.
I got a story with that in a second.
Oh, wow. This is going to get interesting. Awesome. Yeah, my father opened up that location in 1991. I grew up there as a little kid every single day. And then we left around I want to say almost like 2000, around 2000. The school kept going for a bit, but me and my father, we had left that location. So I saw your place and I was like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's funny. It's actually, I bumped into Moon Leslie's son.
Charles.
Yeah, he came. I don't know. It was weird because I would still get mail. Which said like Moon Leslie. This is a couple of years ago.
Oh wow!
And as I was opening, he's telling me, he's like, "Hey, I used to, my dad used to own a place here, and that whatever." And I'm like, and I already knew because I'm not sure how it's tied in, but like I think when I first started with Taekwondo, and my instructor I think was under either his son or him. I'm not quite sure. So I was saying, I'm like, "Oh, this was my instructor." He's like, "Oh, really?" He takes his phone. He's like, "Look," he showed me he had it on speed dial.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I must know him too then.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So getting to that, let's backtrack. We're all on this podcast, we're all about the journey. I always find it very interesting how people got involved in martial arts. Like where did it come from? Now, what year did you start martial arts?
95.
Oh wow. So you started a little bit later in life.
Yeah, I was 16.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and how did that come?
Really, I wanted to do it since I was a kid, but money was tight, so we couldn't really do it. And then it just got to the point where, my mom was like, "Hey, he's not getting any younger, and he's been asking for this since he was, 3. Let's make it happen." So and then I started with a Taekwondo school that wasn't too far away from me at the time.
Okay, and then as you progressed in Taekwondo, because obviously now you own a Muay Thai school, how did that progression go from, just moving from one art to the other? Like what made you want to move to a different art?
It was more or less every time I came across something that was like, it felt too difficult. So as far as like, I would train with other friends and get into scraps, and things like that. And then, I was already pretty proficient. Like I was competing in Olympic style, point assist style. I was probably one of the better guys there in my gym. And then, I would get into like a fight at school and I'm kind of getting, it's not, I feel it should be easier, or I would compete or train with friends that did kickboxing or this. And I'm like, it's too hard, like I feel like it should, I need something to kind of make up for my certain weaknesses.
Okay.
So I was like, okay. And then I would kind of like add something. I'd be like, okay, well, this guy is beating me in boxing. You start adding some boxing, and then you kind of, there's only so much you could do on your own. And then you have to start to look for a teacher,
the right teacher.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't discontinue my training in Taekwondo. I actually went up to, I think, blue or red.
Okay.
And I was still training Taekwondo, but I went to a different gym while I started training in all the other arts as well. So I started Taekwondo in a pure Taekwondo school, but I actually finished and got my black belt in a different school. It was more like a freestyle karate.
Okay.
I guess. But one of the instructors from my Taekwondo school started teaching there. And he was a little bit more the same way. Like he was more into like the fight. So when he started teaching there, they kind of, the rule set was more similar to like Kyokushin or, it was Taekwondo, but we were kicking the legs, we were sweeping. The owners of the place, they actually had black belts in Goju and other karate systems. So it was just kind of like
everything was interesting.
Yeah, we just, whoever was teaching was mixing it. And
at the same point, you were studying traditional arts.
Yeah.
So you had a solid foundation.
Yeah.
Already. And that's one thing I stress to a lot of people, that come into my school, when they bring up the question of, do I teach other arts? And I tell them, I go, no, I teach Taekwondo. Because I'm a believer in, you have to build a foundation someplace.
No, definitely.
And I tell them, I go, start with an art. It doesn't have to be Taekwondo, but definitely start with an art, and build from there. Move on. Once you're proficient in that art, then you could move on. you know, because you don't want to be the jack of all trades, the master of nothing.
Yeah, that's actually funny because one of the guys that I was lucky enough to work with in seminars and so on, his name is Greg Nelson.
Okay.
And he has a saying like that. He says, you know, jack of all trades, master of none, master of few, jack everyone.
Right.
And that was, you know, and, you know, this guy he did a million systems, but he had like his one or two like go-to stuff that he'll just manhandle you in it, you know? So,
because at the end of the day, we go back to what we feel comfortable.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I still, you could even see in some of my pro fights, I get put under pressure. It's like spinning hook kick, you know, like,
right.
You know, so yeah, when you definitely revert back to like, you know, when you get put under pressure, like what was your safety, you know, your safety blanket.
Sure, for sure. Now, you just alluded to it. When did that start to come to be that you started looking to, hey, I could go pro, like I could, you know, move to that next level? Because how did that happen?
I have no interest in competing. I had no interest in turning.
Really?
I had no interest in any of that stuff. I honestly just like martial arts, and I just grew up idolizing it, and I just wanted to learn as many as I can and be as good as I can be and just be better than I was yesterday.
Really?
You know, and that's really it. And when I left, or when I started cross training, I started training in Jeet Kune Do.
Okay.
And that really influenced my mindset because, you know, it's just about proficiency. It's like it really doesn't matter, you know, like what Bruce Lee was not really, he had his own systems, but, you know, he was open to all systems. You know, he was just like, whatever works for you and find out what works, you know, and that was my goal. I'm like, okay, well, maybe this works for this person, but you know, it's not quite working for me the way I want it to, or the way I feel it should work. So let me try this. Okay, this is not really working as well as it could, but let me try that. So I started competing to see what works. So I first originally started competing like Olympic Taekwondo. I was like, okay, this is good, but I'm like, I'm not good at it. You know what I'm saying? Like there's certain things that I'm like, I kind of want to punch this guy in the face and I'm not allowed to.
Exactly.
So and then I went to point fighting. I was like, this is great. I could sweep the foot. I could back fist. And then it was like, okay, I started banging out, you know, first place medals and things like that. And then I would go spar with my friend who did boxing and like Kyokushin, and I'm getting mauled.
Yeah, lit up.
And I'm like, I'm like, okay, well, I got to up, you know, so I started training more like
So you always had that competitive edge. You always look for more.
I don't really see it as competitive. I see it as just more of it's a necessary evil. I don't like competing. Like I get very nervous.
That's crazy because
I'm very non-confrontational.
Because I saw you fight. That's the crazy part. I saw you fight. You know, I remember it was right when I opened up my school. I want to say this is around 2010. And I was working at that time. I was 2010, 2011. I was working around the clock. And my best friend calls me one day. He's like, Joe, I got 2 tickets to this show at the Theater of Madison Square Garden.
Oh, okay. I know.
And, you know, we get there and lo and behold, you're the first fight. And you telling me you're someone that doesn't like to compete. Man, you messed this guy up.
Yeah, I know that fight. That was probably one of my better fights.
Yeah, it was an amazing performance.
Yeah. That one, I like that fight more just because I kind of showed all my influences. You know, so in that fight, you probably see Muay Thai, you probably see boxing, you probably see Taekwondo in it.
Oh, you're sharp.
You probably see a little bit of everything.
By far, was the best fight I saw all night.
Thank you.
By far.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that fight was fun just because I wasn't. Most of the time when I went into a certain type of competition, I wanted to be good at that system. So I wouldn't try to work around it. So like if I did a Taekwondo match, I wanted to try to do good Taekwondo. You know, like if I did a Muay Thai match, I was trying to do Muay Thai. You know, if I was doing, you know, MMA, I wanted to do Jiu-Jitsu. I was trying to work my Jiu-Jitsu. Like, so I would, even if I feel like I could have gone around some way and took a shortcut and to win, I would kind of be a little bit stubborn and be like, no, I'm going to beat this guy at the game, you know, which probably cost me a bunch of wins. But, you know, overall, I wanted to be better at the system that I was trying to learn, you know. So as I jumped around from system to system, you just, some things stick, that you literally can't even get rid of. It's almost like it becomes like a good habit, but when you go to the next system, it carries over. So as I kept going forward, I had like this, luggage from all the other systems that I was doing. So like even now when I teach Muay Thai, I try to teach it as best as I can, but I definitely can't help but have some influences from, my experiences in, doing a judo competition or jiu-jitsu or doing MMA or doing sancho or sanda or, all these other things that they're going to, they're always going to get kind of sprinkled in, here and there.
So now, still focusing on the competition aspect, as a professional fighter, talk to me how high you took it. Talk to me, your biggest accomplishment as a professional fighter.
Well, as far as pro went, I really didn't take it that far. I kind of got what I wanted from it. I was never really looking to be like, oh, I'm going to be a world champion. I'm going to do this, or, also I turned pro kind of late.
Okay.
I was like in my mid 30s and so on.
Oh, wow.
And I wasn't the smartest training, like I kind of did everything. What people now that they're catching on, like, hey, most of your losses and most of your damage is done in sparring. You know what I'm saying? Like so like I would be definitely the one that I'm like, I'm going to spar the biggest guy, full contact, and that's how I'm going to get tough. And if this guy who's 200 pounds can knock me out, this guy who's 120 pounds can't knock me out, which doesn't work like that. All it does is just kind of wear you down. So
you're showing up to the fight. You're not. We're never 100% when we get to the competition, but now you're
But by the time I turned pro, I was already kind of like, I felt like 30 going on 40.
You had a lot of mileage.
Yeah. So I just wanted to gain as much experience as I could. So I did probably I think as far as pro, I think I did like 3 pro Muay Thai fights and I did 1 pro MMA.
Okay.
Yeah. So mainly it was just for me to gain experience. That was really it. I knew what worked. I just wanted to taste that level of competition. So it's very different than amateur. And then there's levels to it. That's like a beginner, pro, and then there's guys, that are, a pro's pro, like they're 200 fights in there, like, so I just wanted to get a taste of what, it was to train like that, and the mentality and the strategies are different because the rounds are longer, the rules are a little different. So, so this way I know that I can help my guys at least get to that level. That was really the only thing I was thinking. I'm like, well, I can't teach you how to get here if I've never been.
If you've never done it.
So it's, it's like giving directions. I gotta actually, helps if I've been to the place.
Listen, I say it all the time. You can't be a swim teacher if you never jumped in the pool.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, it was, for me, it wasn't natural. It was very much like I'm like forcing myself to do it. But because I know also it just improves your level so much, like I feel like one fight is equivalent of like a 1 year of training, so if you're doing 20, 30 fights, I feel like, and you see it, you see guys now, I'm like, they're like 16, 17 years old, but they have like 30 amateur fights, and they've done in 5-6 years what took me 25 years to do, because they're just fighting back to back, month to month, and they're gaining all this experience in such a short amount of time that it's just like, it's like amazing. When I started, it was very hard to even find Muay Thai fights. Now it's like, you can't, you walk outside, you're going to trip over one. Same thing with MMA. You couldn't do MMA. I used to have to go all the way out to like Virginia to do like MMA fights, because you couldn't even do MMA fights, anywhere near New York, or we had to do it like when, like they would have a show, and then, okay, now the last fight, we're going to do MMA fight, but it's like quiet, like, it's a little bit like kind of underground, like, they would tell us like, hey, if anybody shows up, we're going to have to stop you mid fight. And I'm like, okay, it's a little weird, but sure, but,
now it's mainstream now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really mainstream now.
But you see it in the quality of the people competing and everything.
See, now when I'm listening to you right now, I hear more of a coach than a fighter. You talking about how basically you fought so you could help your guys.
Yeah.
Now, would you say that is where your real love and passion is? The art?
Yeah, I think so. Like when everybody else was watching Karate Kid, when they wanted to be Ralph Macchio, I wanted to be Mr. Miyagi.
That's a good one.
So like to me, it was like that was just a goal. I'm like, okay, well, how can I achieve that? I'm like, that's it. I just need to do it, and I wanted to do it honestly. So I wanted to make sure whatever I teach, I've done it. I can say like, well, this works because I've done it, or I've been hit with it, or I've seen, my guys have done it. Like, it's not just off like a theory.
Right.
Or
well, I completely understand that because I just up until recently I just stopped competing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you walk into my school and you see that quote on the wall, a leader leads by example. I completely agree with you. And I think that's where a lot of martial arts schools, this is why it's something very important that my previous guest, a couple of episodes back, Master Mark Williams, you brought up a very important point. There's martial arts schools everywhere, but you have to be lucky to fall into the right one. And I'm a firm believer in you to learn how to fight, you have to learn from someone who fought. It's so important.
Yeah, definitely, especially if it's specific.
Yeah,
like fight specific. Like I remember I made the mistake of trying to coach someone for a boxing match. And I already had done a bunch of Muay Thai fights, a bunch of MMA fights, Sancho, Sanda, like, and a lot of it's boxing. I did a couple of boxing smokers, so I'm like, I could do this. And it was just like such a bad experience for me.
Really?
Because I really just felt so out of place. I didn't really understand the strategies. I didn't understand like, the nuances of it. You just think like, oh, they're just punching. But no, when the guy on the other side, he comes from a boxing gym, it's totally different. His coach is, telling him what to do, the certain rounds and things. So I was kind of like, very much felt like a fish out of water.
Right.
So that was the last time I was like, okay, I'm going to stick to what I know. I'm like, I've done Muay Thai, I'm going to coach Muay Thai. I've done MMA, okay, I'll coach MMA. And I'm like, that's it. I'm not going to try to, sell myself as, something I'm not.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we talk about it all the time in martial arts, various arts, they're more vocal about it and whatnot. We never want to be considered as a fraud. I could speak for, especially Taekwondo. I remember growing up, there were a lot of schools out there that claiming they were Olympians and claiming they were world champions and claiming this when that was never the case, and that's something I've always preached to my students. Don't ever fake it. Your credentials are your credentials, and they're important at the end of the day, because that's what draws, students into our school. Just be real about it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of I guess we would call it like stolen valor in martial arts, but as people get in it, they'll weed themselves out. Like,
exactly.
You can only there's only so much you can, BS your way to the top. Eventually someone's going to call you out on it, or they just won't train with you because, you can only fake so much. And then eventually the beginner is not a beginner anymore. And then now they could see it, so, but yeah, I definitely remember that at one point, because I remember when I was looking for Taekwondo, everybody was like Olympic. And I was just like, man, there's a lot.
And the funny thing was, there were people advertising with the wrong dates. That was the most hysterical thing. 1991 Olympics were in 92. I would find stuff like that. I'm like, what are they doing?
It was always Olympic, or if it was another system, it would be like they always claim to train with like, oh, they trained with Bruce Lee, or they trained with this guy, with this. It's like, before we had such a deep internet.
Right, exactly. This is pre-internet.
Yeah. So like,
guys were claiming they fought Chuck Norris.
I mean, I got my martial arts school through my yellow pages, so it's hard to tell are they telling the truth? I don't know. According to this yellow pages,
right.
This guy trained with Bruce Lee.
The yellow pages.
Yeah.
Wow. People watching this podcast right now, they don't even know what that is. But so being that, now we go into coaching. When did you decide? Now, were you teaching for other people, with other people?
Yeah. So when I first started, I was teaching, even off the bat, like when I was doing Taekwondo, I was helping, I was assisting a lot. And then when I switched to the second, more of like the karate school, I was teaching there a little bit. Same thing, like mostly helping. So I already had a little bit of, experience. And then even then I switched to more of a MMA Jeet Kune Do school. And then there I was, training and kind of assisting, and I would teach classes on my own, but, just sporadically as they gave them to me. But probably around 2003 to 2004, I started teaching full time.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when I started teaching full time, I was still training, myself, obviously, but then I started taking on a bigger role of coaching. So I was, coaching a little bit on jiu-jitsu, and I was coaching a little bit like in Muay Thai. And since we were teaching Jeet Kune Do, so we would have guys do like Sancho and Sanda matches. I would coach them, as well. So I was, kind of coaching a little bit of everything.
And when did you decide to open up your own?
Probably much later on.
Yeah.
I was probably teaching at other gyms for like 13 to 15 years before. And then in like 2014 or so, I started really thinking about like, okay, I gotta, because I at the end of the day, you start to you feel like you feel like you could not so much do it better, but it's just how things are being done don't quite mesh with you, and no one's gonna how do you say, like, no one's gonna treat you the same, if it's not your gym.
I get
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's when it's your gym, okay, now you decide, like, I decide what the rules are. I decide, how I'm treated.
Sure.
I decide, what goes where. And, when you do things for, I'm like 15, 20 years into martial arts, you start to have your own way.
Your own philosophy, your own concepts.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's just,
and unfortunately, when you're, quote unquote, working for someone.
Yeah, it's not your way. Yeah,
it's not your way.
Which is
their
100%
sure
how it should be.
I experienced that before I opened up my own school too.
Every place I trained at, I never questioned how they were doing things. And if somebody else questioned, I'm like, no, this is their place. They want to do it this way. That's the right way to do it. That's simple as that. If I want my own place, if I want to do things my way, I got to open up my own place. I always knew that from day one. It's just a matter of, to pull the trigger. Because, I was like, oh, maybe I don't have enough experience, even though like other people were telling me for years, open up your own gym. But I was like, I don't really quite feel ready, So maybe around 2014, I started to like really look at it. And in 2015, I finally decided to open up my own place.
To pull that trigger.
Yeah.
And how'd that work out? Now, you obviously, through all those years of teaching, you must have had a following.
Yeah, I did. But I'm not a fan of people like what I call like pilfering, like students. So like if this person gave me a shot and, they were letting me teach at their gym, like I'm not going to be a jerk and then be like, okay, come on. I mean, let me see how many guys I could take. So, I definitely like, I leave it, and I started to kind of teach a little bit here and there, different spots, so that I have somewhat of a following. But when I opened my own gym, I just pretty much was like, okay, well, I'm going to open my own gym. I'm not going to really promote it to people who are, I used to teach before. If they hear about it, they hear about it. I'm not reaching out to anybody. I'm just like, that's why I didn't have my name tied to it at all. Like it wasn't like, oh, Ruiz this or Eric, that. Like, no, I wanted a name, and that's the name. And, if people, it's going to go on its own merit,
I agree completely. When I opened up my school in 2010, obviously I went back to Whitestone because that's where people knew me. They knew my father. They knew my family. And I never had the mentality to put my name on my school. I kind of hid it. That's why my logo is a wolf. My last name means wolf. I kind of hid it in there. But especially when it came to the name, no, I completely understand where you're coming from. Because it's honorable at the end of the day. People are gonna come to us based on our merit, based on how we teach.
Yeah, I wanted to be the one to bring it up.
Sure.
I didn't want to catch somebody else's leftovers, or, like I had one of my coaches offer me to use the name of his gym, and I knew it would have been a great help, but I didn't feel comfortable with that. Like I felt like, well, then I'm always gonna have in the back of my head, did I do it myself, or did this person give me that boost? Would I have been successful on my own, or did I need his name to stay afloat? So even though it's definitely tougher, I decided to just go with my own thing and, just sink or swim at that point,
So now we're talking now 10 years later.
Yeah.
Talk to us some of like the biggest accomplishment. Obviously we brought up,
Jill's definitely up there for me, even within my career, that was probably my highlight, is when she won that belt and
so
being in the
took
tournament.
The question away from me.
Yeah, that's definitely up there, because that was it's a huge title. Outside of the UFC, Invicta is probably the right up there, and especially for that weight class, there's no 105 weight class. So as far as 105 goes, that's like the pinnacle.
Sure.
At one point I think Jill was like in the top 5 ranked in the world. So being there with her from day one, it just felt good to me, because I was just like, oh look, I know what I'm doing. Like it was like finally a little pat. Pat
on your back, sure.
Yeah, which I'm the
which we all need.
Yeah, we all need
that validation.
I never. Sure. I feel like I never give it to myself, because that's when you start to. It starts to become too easy, So, but that was like the first time I really felt like, holy crap, like, this is like, I'm on the same playing field with, some big gyms and some big names, and and Jill was definitely, it wasn't like easy. Like she trained. She's that good because she puts in the work, and we put in the work with him, So I felt every minute of the training, every and all the hardships she had to go through. Like you feel it as like a family,
right?
So that was probably like for me it was like peak, where I was like, okay, validation, but I've had that with a few of my guys. I have another guy, he started with me, Ethan Geffen. He's just doing so great as a pro Muay Thai fighter right now. Like he's, probably on the East Coast, I would definitely say he's top 5 with his weight class. I had another student, Kit Fung. She was pretty dominant, like in her amateur career. She even got to turn pro for a fight. So, especially I have like a soft spot for people who are not what I would call like myself, like they're not really fighters. They're people that fight, like if that makes any sense. So, these people are like, like Jill's a therapist, and, Kit's like a PT, and, I remember when I started training Ethan, Ethan's a little different, just because that kid, I think if I give him a golf club, he'd be like a pro golfer. He says he's just one of those guys. He's good at everything. So
natural ability.
Yeah. So but like he was just a kid starting off. So like the people aren't like the clear cut, like, oh, this guy's a fighter, this girl's a fighter. Like those guys are always the ones I kind of gravitate to, because I feel closest to them, because that's the way I felt. Like, like no one's looking at me and going like, oh, that guy's a fighter, like, so I always felt like, oh, I want to, those are the ones I feel like I can cultivate that. The people that everybody else might look over, I'm like, those are the ones I'm like, I give them to me. I'm the one who's,
that.
I take I had another person, he was a pharmacist, probably 100 pounds overweight. Within maybe like a year and a half, he lost about 90 pounds. He was competing. He was winning first place at a Muay Thai competition, so those are the guys that I'm always like more excited to kind of to get to.
Yeah. Because those athletes like that, or students like that's our biggest accomplishment at the end of the day. When you could raise them from the ground up. Yeah. Whenever I'm asked, what's one of your greatest accomplishments as a martial artist, the first thing that comes to my mind is the girl that I put on the national team that started with me from day one, that had the focus of a mosquito. No focus.
Mm-hmm.
All these years later, we bring them up to that point. And it's great listening to this coming from you, that it's almost like we push our own accomplishments aside for the betterment of our students.
Yeah, for me, I feel like I don't like to say like, oh, I brought them up.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like as much as I was along for the ride.
You were along for the, you were on the journey.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's like, it's like you get to relive the journey.
Sure.
Like, and that's the whole thing. It's like seeing a movie from, when you see a movie with someone who's never seen it before, it's like you're seeing it for the first time again.
Right.
So if I really enjoy a movie, I'm like, hey, you should watch this, just because I want to enjoy it again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. Like I see a person, I'm like, I see a little bit of what I had or what I went through, and I'm just like, man, let's go through this again. We'll go through it together. And then another person, I'm like, oh, but I feel like, any of the people I named, I feel like they would have done great if they've on their own, definitely. But it's just nice that I got to be
part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really it. So I'm like, oh, it's, and it's nice that they allowed me to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's more the way I try to see it, so.
And I'm sure they see it as well. Like I said, Jill was quick to acknowledge you, I'm sure they see it as well, especially because it takes a village.
Yeah, definitely.
It takes a village, not only for ourselves as school owners, or as athletes. We never do it on our own. And in martial arts period, you can't do it on your own.
Yep.
You can't go buy a Century Wave Master, kick it, all right, I'm going to go fight. No, it doesn't work like that. Get a grappling dummy and grapple. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah, you definitely have to also like kind of mesh with people, because there's definitely places I've sent people to. I'm like, oh, this guy's great, and they go there and they don't really mesh with the person. And they go somewhere else and they're like, oh, I click with this person. Like, even if, let's say, the credentials on person A is much higher than person B, but they just don't speak the same language, and they just get farther with the person B. So I see that tend to be happen a lot as well. Like, just because the gym is producing UFC fighters doesn't mean you're going to be a UFC fighter.
Right.
It's just maybe that their style of coaching doesn't click with you. Maybe it's just not quite right with you at that time. So sometimes you just need to find a place that you just mesh with. Because if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to show up. So the first thing is you have to find you have to click with the person. You can't just be like, well, do what I say when I say it. It's just, you're never going to get anywhere like that. So you got to click with your clients, click with your students, click with your fighters, and then once you kind of have that mesh, like you're like we said before, you're kind of on the journey together. You're not just kind of like, all right, come on, follow me, and that's the way I always felt. Like I was just making people for me to train with. Like, I want to get better. I still want to get better. And I'm like, okay, well, now I could just make people. I don't have to go anywhere. They're good. They come back, now they're giving me, good training, and I get better, so like, that's how it kind of always ends up. I'm just making training partners for myself, so I don't have to go to go to other gyms,
Right.
I'm like, oh, you just come to me, this is great. The same, like the other guys now that, I was teaching years ago, they come in and I'm like, man, this is going to be a good training session today.
Sure. Keeps us in line. Keeps us in shape.
Definitely. Yeah.
At the end of the day, as school owners, we are our product. I say it all the time. We are our product. My mom with the restaurant next door, she always says, you eat first with your eyes and then your mouth. So when, they walk into the school, granted, we might not be able to demonstrate it the way we did.
Yeah, we used to.
The hips don't lie. But we definitely know how to explain it.
Yeah.
Because we've done it, and we're still, knock on wood, reasonably in good shape to do it. So it keeps us honest at the end of the day. Yeah. I love training with my athlete. I love training with my students, to a certain point though,
Yeah, definitely. No, for sure. It's one of those things. It keeps you remotivated, and when you see them doing well, it kind of sparks it. That's when you see your guys doing good, that's when you start thinking like, maybe I should compete again.
Right.
You know, because you get that, you know, you get that buzz a little bit. You know, I kind of got swept into it a couple of years ago. I was supposed to have like another pro fight, and it just kind of fell through. But why did I get swept on me? Because Joe won that title. I was like, man, I'm like, the air smells different today. You know. So
I gold belt.
Yeah, you know, I was just like, I'm like, you wake up, you're like, I don't know, like the air's a little different today. I'm like, let's see what's up, you know. But you know, it just reinvigorates you to you know, stay on track, you know.
So now, just to kind of backtrack, because we've spoken so much about different arts, kind of leads me to the question of what or who was your biggest influence coming up?
Like it shifted a lot. And I would say like strictly within like I would say I could be influenced by someone like just the martial art aspect, not so much them as a person or you know, like sometimes you're but as far as like just training and things like that, I've had a few. I would say like Dan Inosanto probably plays a big part. Like like he was, you know, like even now I find him very inspirational. I mean, the guy's like, you know, pushing 90, and when you watch, he's still doing seminars, he's moving, and I'm just like, wow, this is, you know, this dude is amazing, you know. I would say like Erik Paulson was a big influence as well. Greg Nelson was a big influence. Some of the like fighters like Sanchai, Bokao, like those type of things. I would say like George St. Pierre is a big influence. There was a few other UFC fighters. I always gravitate towards the UFC fighters. They come from traditional arts, and they're not like really like talkers and you know, like, so I always like the guys that kind of bring that.
They don't need to sell a fight with their mouth.
Like they like that. That was one of the things I say. Like with George St. Pierre, he never really talked trash.
No.
You know? It was, I don't know why I can't remember the name right now, but it was another. He's a Brazilian. His dad is Japanese, and
Lyoto Machida.
Yeah, Machida. Oh, I love Machida. You know, like just not so much stylistically, but just the way he presents himself.
Sure.
Like I just gravitate towards that. You know, like he does what he needs to do. He'll pull his shot like a second before when the guy gets knocked out. He's like, what?
Is it? Yeah.
On a dime, you know, like those type of things. Like, so those.
I remember he had that one knockout, and he could have went in there and hit the guy again. And
he stopped like he just stopped like an inch away from the guy's head, and you know, he just took a step back, like bowed, and that's it. And I was like, you know, like those are the guys I've always like really enjoyed watching. You know, the ones that I look at, I'm like, oh, he's like they represent like martial arts.
Martial arts, right?
And they represent they give it a legitimacy, you know, because at some, you know, at one point, you know, it started to, you know, especially like in the 80s, and so like it got a little goofy, and you know, like everybody, it kind of almost like lost that respect of like that realism. You know, it became too much movies, and everybody thought they were blood sport, and you know, trying to do like dim mak and things like that. You know, and then when the UFC came out, it started to kind of get that little bit of a, you know, more of a legitimacy to it. But then it got too, in my opinion, too much to like we're just fighters. You know, so I like that medium. You know, and like I said before, like that's what kind of attracts me to Muay Thai. Like like when you Muay Thai is a lot, like there's not too much compared. I mean, maybe in the States a little different, but in Thailand is very rarely you're gonna see someone like
now. You've been to Thailand, correct?
Yeah, for a short time. Yeah, and they don't really talk trash. It's, you know, it's just come do what you got to do, and that's it. You know, and you'll see them having fun as they're fighting, and guys lose, no one's booing them. You know, if they have compared to, like I was talking to one of my students the other day, like here you can have a boxer who's, you know, 20-0. He gets one loss and people are like, oh, he's washed up. You know, same thing in MMA, the same thing. Guys like, you know, 12-0, he gets one loss, oh, he's washed up. 2 losses, like, oh, he should retire. I feel you got 2 losses, you know? And you go, the Thais, man, they don't care. You have guys with 60 losses. And I mean,
I know, I've seen some of those records.
I mean, granted, they have like 300 fights, but
exactly,
they're just like, nah, he gives a good fight. like they're just excited to see him fight. They don't care if he,
it's a different philosophy.
Yeah, it's very different. And, I enjoy that a lot because I see, like, say even here, like in the States, some of the fighters, I would see them that, they don't have, it's amateurs. It's not a big deal. It's like they don't have perfect records. And it's like, who cares, man? Who cares if you're 12-1 or 1-12? If you enjoy it, you're not getting hurt, and you're giving a good fight, like, then keep doing it.
Sure.
Like, if you're an exciting fighter to watch, you're an exciting fighter to watch. Doesn't matter if you win or you lose, you're still an exciting fighter. You're still getting the people on their feet, like, and that's something, I mean, granted, winning is, great. And if you want to turn pro, you kind of have to focus on it. But, if you're doing it just because you enjoy the art and you enjoy the competition, who cares, man? It's like no one's really going to look back and be too crazy about, like, oh, what were your amateur records like? No one cares. It's it's the amateurs, like, just do it. Just get it, just have fun. And as long as, like I said, as long as you're not getting hurt, do it as long as you can. It's a little different pro because, now there's more money involved and, it's other people's money. So, like, that's a little bit different. You gotta have to, play the win-loss game a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the energy in Thailand was so different that, like, it was just so pleasant to be around,
No, and I brought it up with guests in the past, specifically Shotokan Sensei.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how here in the States, even in regards to the black belt, a lot of people talk about the black belt, how it's an end game.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Eastern philosophy, it's the beginning. We start the martial art at the black belt level.
Mm-hmm.
And then we keep learning and we keep progressing. And at the end of the day, it is about the art because that's what we have. That's what's ingrained in us. And now I want to go back to this because you alluded to it in the beginning. Like, explain to not only to me and the audience, because I've seen this, worn on a Muay Thai fighter's head, and explain that process. There's, I don't want to disrespect and use the word dance because it's not a dance.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Well, it's there's definitely people who will probably explain it much better, especially because it's very cultural and it's not my culture. I've adopted it.
You've adopted
to some extent, but I definitely can learn more as well. But for the most part, it's basically like good luck.
Okay.
So like the Mong Kong would be the piece that you wear on your head. Jeet would be the pieces you wear on your arm.
Which is this right here, if you want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they're pretty much like good luck amulets to keep you safe and, those type of things.
So it's spiritual.
Yeah, it's very spiritual. Like these I actually had blessed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when I was in Thailand. Like everything, every religion will kind of take on the form of the country as well. So their form of Buddhism is very intertwined with whatever, religion was prior to that. And it just kind of made their own thing at that point, and this is very ingrained in that. So when I went, it was a Thai Buddhist, monk that's blessing my, to help keep me safe and so on. Same goes for like the tattoos, like the Thai tattoos, a lot of times they're to kind of invoke power or safety and those type of things. So it's a lot of superstition, I guess, would be wrapped up in it. Stepping over the top rope type of things. Recently now they changed it, but at one point they were like, they didn't want like women in the same ring and things like that because it's a lot of superstition mixed into it. But for the most part, it's really just good luck charms, to keep you safe during the fight. And the dance, as you say, would be the Wai Crew and the Ramoy.
Okay.
It's more or less the same thing. It's sort of like a mix of good luck, blessing like kind of the ring, but it's also to show respect to your gym, to your family, to like your lineage. So the same way, like let's say a form, that form is passed down. So let's say if someone's doing a Shotokan or Goju Ryu form, that's probably the same form they were doing 100 years ago.
Exactly.
And this can be probably traced back even more. Like if you're doing a Y crew, that Y crew might be hundreds of years old, because before it was Muay Thai, it was Muay Baran. And, it was a system that they used. It was a battle system. It was a war system, and there was weapons and things like that. So, these are things that were done before battle. So for all you can trace back your Y crew all the way, to 500, 600, 700 years ago. So it's just one of those things. It's just a tradition. I'm not sure if they do it anymore, but I know at one point you would lose points if you didn't do a Y crew before your match.
I like that.
And a lot of people would lose and not realize why. And it was that they weren't doing a Y crew. Like foreigners would come in, they weren't doing a Y crew, and they like automatically just deduct points for it and so on. So like they take it, pretty seriously. You'll see also like the fighters adapt to it. So and Thailand it's pretty multicultural, so as far as well as multi like religion. So they'll have like Muslim fighters do it, and they have a little different I would say a little different style to it, because they incorporate, obviously they're doing it towards their religion, but it still represents the same thing. It's still to respect, your family, your coach, your religion, your God, whatever it is. So, that's brought into the fight, which to me kind of makes it more than just a fight. It's like you're really putting yourself, almost every aspect of yourself on the line at that point. But it also brings a level of respect. And that's what I like about that. The fight starts with a show of respect. And 99% of the time, it's going to end with a show of respect.
No, and also gives us a greater appreciation of what we're doing. And these are traditions that I feel, us as martial artists, we can't let it go. We can't let it die.
Oh yeah, for sure.
These are traditions that have to stay well after we're gone, and for the future generations of athletes and students learning and art. Again, I've spoken about this on this podcast. We can't forget those that paved the way for us and how they did it. It's our job, as I consider us, the younger generation, we have to keep it up for the future generation. And now that's amazing. I really, really, really like it.
Yeah, I was actually, when you asked me to bring something, I had a really hard time figuring out what to bring. Because there's nothing really I'm too tied to, like as far as I'm like, this is, I feel like, everything that is important, you keep it in, like in here, and you keep it in here,
Sure.
So there's nothing that I can't replace in a way. But so at that point, I was just like, do I bring my black belt? Do I bring this? Do I bring that? But, I was like, okay, well, this is probably what, represents the best representation of the system. Like a complete representation of the system, where it's not just, punches and knees and elbows and things like that.
It's more than that.
Yeah.
It's more than that. Coach Erik, I would be remiss not to give a shout out to my buddy Connor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's for the audience, I teach your son Connor. He's a great kid, and I'm really happy with his progression. Especially since he joined the teen adult class.
Yeah, he got really into it. Like
he's doing a great job.
Or so.
It's a good group. Again, it's our job as, not just job, it's our responsibility as, school owners to create a positive environment, because at the end of the day, and I'm sure you felt this way as well, the martial arts school is your safe place. It's your sanctuary. It's
I've said it. I feel more comfortable in my gym than I do like in my bed. Like it's just when I go in, I just feel like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Oh, I get it.
Like there's nowhere else I feel as much like you're like, okay, there's that feeling. It's very rare to have that feeling when you're like, oh, I'm exactly where I should be. That's one of the few places where I'm like, I'm exactly where I should be. So it's definitely a sanctuary. And it's nice if it can be that for other people, that just kind of makes you, that's also really makes you like a group, like a family,
right.
It makes you a tribe.
Right. So when I see, Connor talking to the other students, a new white belt that just came in, and they're talking to the other boy, and I just, it's a great feeling because it gives more validation to what we do, not only as school owners, but not only as coaches, but as martial artists. We build a good community. We build a way of life for everyone. Coach Erik, talk to the audience. How can they, if they want to find out more about you and more about what you do and your school, where could they follow you and reach you?
We're pretty easy to find if you go on on our Google page. We also have a website, ringsportmuaythai.com. You can follow us on Facebook as well as Instagram. So pretty much the regular places that you can always come through. We're in Whitestone. So, we're pretty easy to get to from either side of the bridge.
Right. And now, before leaving, for anyone interested in martial arts, what would be the best advice you would give them?
It's not my advice. I'm quoting Mark Denny. But he would say is you want things to be fun, fit, and functional. Because if it's like, he's like, if it's not fun, you're not going to do it. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be the greatest system on earth, and it's going to get you in great shape. But if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it.
Right.
It should keep you fit. Because you want to be in it for the long run. If it's not keeping you fit, you're not going to be able to, stick it on. You're going to be able to keep up with the new white belts.
Right.
And it should be functional. Now that can be different to everybody. It could be functional, like, I wanted to work for self-defense. It could be functional, I wanted to work for competition. It could be, the functional could be anything you want, but it should serve, at some point, it should serve some sort of a purpose, in your life.
Nice.
So I think that's probably that's stuck with me since, for like 20 or 30 years that I've heard it. Just keep it fun, fit, and functional.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Great talk. With that being said, thank you everyone for tuning in to A Black Belt Way of Life. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a like. Shoot us a comment. Follow us wherever you consume your podcasts. Again, a huge thank you to our apparel company, Best Martial Arts, Muto USA, and to our show sponsor, Mr. Joseph Ferrone of Whitestone Realty. For all your real estate needs, both commercial and residential, please check the show notes for all his information. Always remember, everyone, the words my father said: a black belt is worn around your heart, never your waist. A Black Belt Way of Life was produced by Press Record Studios.